Terence the toad lives in fluffy gardens. Terence lives here, at One Waterfall Drive, to be precise. Like most toads, Terence sometimes says,
Ribbit.
But unlike most toads, Terence only says,
Ribbit.
when he is annoyed. Like when he has no bread for a sandwich,
Ribbit.
or when he drops something on his foot,
Ribbit.
or when he gets jam all over his face.
Ribbit.
Most of the time, however, Terence is a happy little toad and says things like,
Lovely day.
or
Wouldn't it be a nice day for a swim?
Terence does like a good swim. That is, if nobody is watching. If there's anyone around, he'd rather be inside where nobody can see him. Otherwise he gets terribly embarrassed, because he thinks he looks so very ugly. You don't think Terence looks ugly, do you? Terence does. Who ever heard of a handsome toad? Our story begins with a splash. Terence jumped into the pool outside his house. He popped his head up out of the water and said to himself,
Oh, it is a nice day for a swim.
at least he thought he said it to himself. As it happened, Mindy the flamingo was out for a walk and heard him. Yes, it is, Terence, she replied. May I join you? Terence liked Mindy a lot. She was such a pretty flamingo. And that's why Terence didn't want Mindy to see that he was such an ugly toad.
No, you may not.
He snapped. Terence jumped out of the water.
Ribbit. Ribbit.
He ran to his little house and slammed the door. Mindy was very puzzled, so she knocked on the door.
Go away.
Shouted Terence through the letterbox, and added an annoyed,
Ribbit.
Oh dear, thought Mindy to herself. Terence must be very angry at me for something. Terence was just embarrassed. He wasn't really angry at Mindy, and he certainly didn't want to upset her. So he very slowly opened the door. What's wrong? Asked Mindy. Terence looked a little sad.
I'm so ugly and you're so pretty,
He replied.
I didn't want you to see me swimming.
It's true that she was a very pretty flamingo, but she didn't think Terence was ugly one little bit. So she grabbed his hand and pulled him out of the house.
Ribbit. Ribbit. Ribbit.
Terence didn't like being pulled by the hand. Now, who would you rather look like? Mindy asked. Terence thought about this and replied,
Well, Wee Reg the puppy has such a cute little nose.
So Mindy the flamingo brought Terence the toad to Wee Reg's house. She looked closely at Wee Reg's cute little yellow nose. Then she sat Terence down and, using some face paint, she painted a little yellow nose that looked just like Wee Reg's. Terence looked very funny with a little yellow nose. Wee Reg let out a little laugh.
Ribbit. Ribbit. Ribbit.
Terence didn't like to be laughed at. Then Mindy asked Terence who else he might like to look like. Terence replied,
Well, Fudge and Lily the kittens have such cute little ears.
So Mindy pulled Terence all the way to Fudge and Lily's house. Inside, Mindy stuck 2 pieces of card on Terence that looked just like Fudge and Lily's ears. Terence looked very funny with a little yellow nose and cute little ears. Fudge and Lily laughed until they couldn't stand up.
Ribbit. Ribbit. Ribbit.
Then Mindy asked if there was anyone else he might like to look like.
Well, Pip the squirrel has such a cute fluffy tail,
he said. So Mindy waved goodbye to Fudge and Lily, although they didn't see because they were busy playing a naughty trick on Mr. Johnson. At Pip the squirrel's house, Mindy used cotton wool to make a big fluffy tail for Terence that looked just like Pip's tail. Terence looked very funny with a little yellow nose, cute little ears and a big fluffy tail. Pip let out a little laugh.
Ribbit! Ribbit! Ribbit!
Mindy gave Terence a mirror. "Now," she said, "you have a cute little nose, cute little ears, and a cute fluffy tail. Do you still look ugly?" Terence looked at himself. No, he didn't look ugly. He looked very, very silly. Totally ridiculous. And Terence let out a little laugh. Then a big laugh. Then he rolled around the floor laughing.
Oh dear,
He said when he calmed down.
I do look awfully silly.
Mindy smiled and nodded. Terence looked up at Mindy and said quietly,
I think I want to be back to normal again.
He shook away the ears and the tail and wiped away the nose. He looked at himself in the mirror and he smiled.
I like me, just the way I am,
he said. "So do I," beamed Mindy. "Now let's go for a swim," she said, and pulled Terence out of the house.
Ribbit! Ribbit! Ribbit!